tell you again, I train people to live life with their dogs the way I live life with my dogs, right? Because like, again, I know it works for me and I know it's helped me, especially in having large packs. And I don't do a lot of that kind of stuff. I really don't, you know? It's great initially, right? To keep them focused and start developing a working relationship and stuff like that. But long term, I only use commands where I absolutely need them.
And again, all of this, I want her to know, like, yes, the affection is totally fine. You're allowed to be yourself, but there is just that threshold, right? You know, obviously, our relationship has built off like more of like the routine, the program, and everything like that, where clearly, obviously, you guys have much more of like a loving relationship, like longer relationship, right? So I kind of figured, you know, that usually we have to work a lot higher. I mean, she's doing really good. This is actually where I typically work with it. So she's doing really good.
You're doing so good.
And this is like also like something that another reason why I like doing it too is I want you to see that like I want to keep this personality, right? This is why we love her. We like she has that super happy-go-lucky kind of attitude. And I want her to know that that is totally acceptable. Just don't cross that threshold, right? I usually recommend, at least for like the first day or two, so this transition from here to home is as positive and as smooth for her and for you as possible. It's something that I usually recommend having the lead on just when you're practicing it. You know, it doesn't need to stay on all the time, just when you're like kind of warming up and doing these practices and everything. And it, for a few different reasons, you know, in terms of just eliminating confusion as we're kind of doing these commands. If she's just really pumped when she gets home and she's really excited and everything, and you're trying to work it, obviously she's only getting as far as the leash. So it's not something where you have to do this whole chase and run around the house and everything and grab her. So that's one reason. Another reason is just working on the impulse control that we'll see in a minute with all of our commands, and just allowing her to kind of see me pick it up. And a lot of times they get really excited when the lead picks up. They know like, okay, I get to come off, right? So allowing to work on those impulse controls is going to be really important as well. Now, the duration, these first two commands, the beds and the downs, are obviously really important with kind of bringing this energy level down. So again, the big example is always guests coming over, and so I'll probably use that example multiple times. But putting her over on that bed, and you can see even the first time I put her on, she's right at the edge of the bed, she's whining, you know, a little bit here and there. But she very quickly kind of calms down a little bit. Now you can see she's still panting, she's still very stimulated, her ears are perked up and everything. So she's still ready to go, but she's calming down. She's trying to calm down, right? And so that is the whole kind of point of these bed stays and down stays, is to be able to let her have kind of this little corner of the room where she can see, smell, hear all these people coming in and not feeling obligated to have to go and like interact with them all the time, right? So this will be really important with you going home and just working these durations. And it's something that, for all of these commands, you know, I don't expect you to block out 2 hours a day to do this training, right? The whole point of her coming here was that I was able to implement all those rules and kind of teach what she needs to know. For you, I want it to just be something where 15 minutes or so a day, you're finding time, whether it's, you know, doing the dishes, making dinner, folding laundry, watching TV, whatever it may be, right? Where you can just, you're already occupied doing something and she can be occupied for those 10, 15 minutes doing something else, like a command, a bed stay or a down stay, regardless of where you are, you know. Just to keep it fresh and just to let her know that the same rules apply. Even though you're going back home where this structure wasn't before, you're now picking up on it and holding her to that same criteria, right? Now again, this is another reason why I like it, this impulse control. I like to pick up the lead first. She stays, so I can reward her. Good. When I'm rewarding for these commands, it's always within the time of the beginning and the end, right? So in the duration is when I'm rewarding. So she gets on the bed, I tell her bed, she gets on, good, and reward, right? Before I release, she holds duration for X amount of time. I pick up the lead, tell her good, reward, and then I release, right? Okay? Because a lot of times people, like, they're like, good job, okay, and then they come over here and then they reward. But what you just rewarded for is for her coming off the bed, right? So make sure that if you're ever rewarding, do it within the time of the duration, right? So go ahead, up to the bed, tell her bed, perfect, good, and then reward. Good job. And then you can go ahead and just release right away.
Okay.
Perfect. Now you can already see the body language change from where I was working it to where you just did. You know, she's still very up to the bed. She's whining a little bit more, zigzagging through your legs a little bit more, right? So it's something that this is where I want to work a lot of that repetition before I even get to duration, because right now, if we try to do duration, I'm almost guaranteed she's going to hop right off, right?
Yeah.
But my goal is get in the routine of doing this repetition and letting her know, yep, we're still doing this command and you're still held to that. And then we can do duration once I kind of start seeing her calm down a little bit more. So we're just going to do this a couple more times. Now this time I'm going to have you just drop the leash. And then just walk away. Don't worry about like backpedaling or anything like that. Just go ahead and walk away. Perfect. There you go. Because I want to like right off the rip be as casual as possible, right? If we do this kind of like slow backpedaling, like we're anticipating her getting off, right? It's almost going to kind of like keep the focus on you more, right? But if you just like drop the leash and you walk away, she's going to make the mistake regardless. So you might as well make it as casual as possible right off the rip. And if she makes a mistake, fine, whatever correction, put her right back on, right? Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of what I expect. Like she's doing amazing. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of touch base on a little bit more of the other small things that we want, the socials. If we have time, we can even go up to like Edgewater or something and work on like the dogs with the reactivity and all that, you know. So I'm very loose on the leash, right? Again, I'm allowing her to make the mistake of walking too far ahead or walking too far out from me, right? It's something, if I were to see another dog, this is just, again, another way of just having that high success, because what a lot of people do, they see that dog coming and they start like winding up, or they start kind of taking that slack out, right? Anticipating she's going to lunge, right? Now, putting that tension on her before she's even reacted kind of, again, snowballs that into, okay, why is mom holding me back? You know, right? So it's something where, you know, it's something that she has to kind of know that, you know,
it's just casual.
Yes, it's nothing to be scared of, whereas if we're putting that tension on even before she's had a reaction, or before maybe that dog's even reacted, right? It's something that we're kind of setting her up. But what I do is I'll keep that loose leash and I'll just kind of walk into the grass, create a little bit more distance with it, where I can still be loose on it, and worst case scenario, she does react, she does lunge or something, she's not gonna get anywhere close to that dog. So this will be a good example. So my eyes are on her, not on that dog, right? Because I want my timing for this to be good, right? The sooner we can start simulating that off-leash heel, the faster we'll be able to get there, right? And that's the whole kind of thing with like, the less we use the leash, the faster we can get rid of it, right? The less we are having to rely on our leash work, pulling her, holding that tension so she doesn't react, right? Then the faster we can get to that point of trusting her to stay in that bubble, not be reactive and all that. Now in situations you can't get that far off or something like that, right? You can always just pull off and go into a down, right? Again, creating a very stable position for her, right? And it's something where if she does break it, again, your timing can be a little bit quicker, right? Sometimes when you're walking, it can happen like that and then she's already pulled off and lunging, right? If you have the time to go and sit and be in a down, right, you can allow that thing to walk by, and it can help you with like watching her more so than the distraction. And the second you start seeing her come up, again, that timing of the correction can be a lot faster. Perfect. Nice.
Gosh,
That was good. Yeah?
I've done that before.
So yeah, so that was really good. Now you can see there was that
She
there was
like
that second, right?
baiting with herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, it's because that dog kind of came at her, right? That's
Yeah.
that. I think that's her only like trigger. I'll walk over this way so you don't have to walk in the sand. Sorry. Is she's very much still like sensitive to it, right?
Yeah.
But she knows that structure, and she was even kind of checking in with you. You know, she was trying to make sure she was doing the right thing. That's where in that situation, you know, that's where you can kind of stop if you want to and give that really big, good job, you know, give a lot of that physical affection. And that's again what we call like that jackpot moment of like, you did something that I know is not easy for you to do, and you still did the right thing. So I want to make it very clear that that is the great thing to do. Right?
Yeah.
It's not gonna bite me. I just don't want it to even be a thing of a possibility, right? So a lot of people, they want to put their hands in, they want to pull the bowl out when he's eating. You don't need to do that, right? If you release him to eat, he's allowed to eat, right? So let him finish eating, and then once he does, again, you're waiting for him to disengage, right? So if he needs to lick the bowl, or even if he kind of like stands up for a second, breathes, and then kind of moseys off again, whatever, fine, right? But again, it's something where sometimes even that, they'll be done, but if you go too fast to go get the bowl, then they still get nippy, right? So it's something that we just kind of have to watch for that, right? So I'm gonna go get the bowl real quick. You can go ahead and release him.
Okay.
And again, so I'm putting it down, right? And if he goes for that bowl, then I'm gonna give him that big correction, right? Okay. And I'm not messing with him. I'm not gonna move really at all. And I just put like half a cup in there, so let him finish it. Wait for him to disengage. Now, again, if it's something where he's sitting down, but he's kind of close, you know, you can always just move it away. Right? Take it up. Then he's good, right? So that's what I'm gonna have you do. Fill this up again a little bit. Perfect. I'm gonna hold on to the remote so you can just focus on this, right? So go ahead and release him.
Okay.
Perfect. And then, you know, wherever you want to do it, put it in the middle of the room, right? Now again, if he goes for it, right? And I'm telling you right now, I'm on a higher setting, so it's going to be a big reaction if you give him a correction, right? I'm just warning you right now, right? But if it's something when you put that down, he takes a step, tell him no, and just kind of back away, all right? Go ahead. Perfect. And now whenever you're ready, go ahead and release him with that okay.
Okay.
And again, I don't care if he licks the bowl for 2 minutes, you know, I'm waiting for him to leave that thing alone. Now again, wait for him to stabilize. Perfect. Now if you want, you can just go kick that bowl away. There you go. Now, okay, perfect. Now I was gonna say, if he started walking towards that bowl again, that's when I was gonna give him a correction, right? Now he got up, but probably just because of the noise, but that's how I wanna do it. So we're gonna do that one more time, or wherever you want it.
Okay.
He's like, I love this part. Now, at home, do you have a bowl that you just put on the ground like that, or do you have like something for him?
I have his bowl, and yeah, like I'll just like fill it up and put it down.
Okay, cool. So this will work.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Cool. I just wasn't sure. Some people have like stands for them and all that stuff. Okay. Cool. So that's exactly how I wanted you to do it. Right. Nothing fancy, but it's very clear that you are the one that is in control that whole time. Right. And if he were to, now again, we didn't have any issues, so it's hard to show what the reaction was going to look like. Right. But it's a big reaction. Right. And that's because I'd rather get you to jump out of your skin and run away, right, than the other way around, right? So that's how we're going to do it. Now I was at a 70, but you know I would probably at least be at there, you know, and I was doing it more so just when I started, but you know, if you ever wanted to go like on a high or something too, right? Whatever you feel more comfortable with, right? So dealing with the food, that's how I want to do it. Now toys are very similar in the sense that, you know, because again, sometimes you can have them, sometimes you need to take them away for whatever reason, right? You're done. Especially if there's guests around or something like that, all toys are away, right? Just for right now, or at least the wobble, but probably for right now, all the toys. Just so it's very clear, okay, we're just not even going to deal with this, you know, when the guests are here, because you don't want to make him stressed out and feel like he needs to do it, right? But also he just can't do that, right? So that's just an easy, safe bet. Just if it's not there, he's not able to do it, right? When he is playing with that toy or something like that, again, we're looking for that disengagement, right? If he is growling or snarling or anything like that, right, then that's when you kind of need to be more aware of it, right? Making sure that you have this on. If he ever is going to play with his toys, making sure that the collar is always on, because that's usually the biggest mistake people have, is they forget to put the collar on or something, and they let him do it, and then they're resource guarding, and now they can't do anything, right? Now they're back to before, right? And again, giving him those little wins goes a long way for him, right? If this is the routine, again, just like the jumping or the other behavioral issues, it's something where if we can be consistent on him every single time, then it's something that it's much more likely to stop.
bed stays.
Yep. Good. All right. How was getting him into the house?
Actually, it worked out really well.
Yeah.
The first couple days it was a little tense, but
Sure.
now
Well, when you say a little tense, what specifically were you seeing?
just, I mean, nothing really. Just the other dog's a little bit timid around other dogs. 'Cause
I understand.
He's been hurt before.
Yeah.
But he's starting to like warm up really well.
Cool. They seem to be getting along and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We started going on walks together recently, and they do really well.
Great.
So.
Well, usually my first question for everybody is then, what would you say he's done the worst with?
He's super great with the bed stays, but then, like if I come home from work, like she'll have him in a bed stay, or
Yeah.
she comes home from work.
Sure.
That's the only time that he'll break it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a paw off kind of thing, or he'll kind of like wander off.
Yeah.
But it's not even every time. No, and he does correct after we correct him. He
Okay.
does stay.
That's a great opportunity to practice it. So my wife does that a lot with the dogs because she's usually doing like homework or something like that on the computer when I'm getting home. And to avoid like that stampede of the dogs running over to see what's going on, she'll have them all in downstays before I come in. And I remember the first couple of times she started doing that with them, they would break it, she'd correct them, put them back in. You know, that happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good about holding it now, but the key was her being firm enough with the correction, right? So if you're not seeing a reduction in the amount of times that he's breaking it, meaning over the next week here, you know, every time you come in or vice versa, he still breaks it. He might fix himself once you correct him, but he still breaks it initially. Start going way higher on your level then for that.
But then he does this like weird thing where, if, like the one day we were at the park, there were deer.
Yeah.
And he was like, I didn't know what to do because he was like paying attention to me, but he wasn't paying. Like his ears were all perked, and he
Sure.
was like looking and kind of
Yeah.
warning, but I would stop and he would kind of stop with
Yeah.
me.
So a couple things, right? So I'm looking for compliance, right? So as long as he's being compliant,
That's what I figured.
it's okay, right? Like even like my Malinois, for example, like he's very prey driven, and sometimes there's deer like literally like 12 feet away from us over there or something like that. And you better believe he's pretty fixated on them still in that moment. But same deal, he'll listen to me perfectly fine in that situation. He doesn't break the command or anything like that. Now, one thing I'll do sometimes is you could test him a little bit more, right? So it sounds like you've been doing like the stopping, he's stopping with you, stuff like that. Maybe use that as an opportunity to work some downs, right? Work something that might be more challenging for him so that if he makes the mistake, you can capitalize on it and give a nice firm correction for it, which will get his attention even further off of that distraction then at that point. This looks great. I mean, this is pretty impressive. Usually, you know, first time people come back, it's a little sloppier than this, so I'll definitely take that.
Practicing.
Well, I would say then looking at last time and looking at what you're telling me now, distraction still probably is going to be the most beneficial thing to take a look at. So let's do this. Let's take him around the corner to Edgewater, but we'll work him around distractions there. There's usually a decent amount of dogs and people and stuff, and especially since we're getting to like after work hours now. Sure am. All right, so let's do this. I want to, we're going to start walking right off the rip. I want to watch you just enforce the walking here, and we'll see how that looks and see if there's anything we got to adjust there first. So if you want, we'll start cruising that way and just hop on the path.
Okay, Bronx, come.
What have been the bad situations you've seen?
The one was the kid was coming up towards the cage and
Oh, he was in a crate when it happened?
He was in a crate when
Okay.
that happened, but he did nip at that kid. But the other one was the kid was just in my room and somebody had let him into the house and he didn't know
Yeah.
that the little kid was there. But he came down and like bit her back
Mm-hmm.
because she was like facing the bed.
Yeah.
But that was,
Okay, gotcha. And how often would he even be around them, would you say?
anymore now that he's with us.
Yeah.
It's not like a super frequent thing, like
Mhm.
every once in a while, like we have like a party or like my sister
Okay.
comes to visit maybe every couple weeks or something.
Yeah. So my general rule of thumb when it comes to like younger kids, is that unless they're kids that my dog is going to be around all the time, I just don't really see a reason to have him around them, right? Now, that doesn't mean that he couldn't be around a kid, right? Like if your sister was coming over every other week and bringing the kid and stuff like that, obviously there's some proactive steps you can put in place to get him, you know, to obviously be comfortable with that. But it's just, I always weigh out like the risk to reward of situations like that. You know what I mean? And obviously the risk when you're dealing with younger children and a big dog obviously is much higher, right? Generally the first step, if I were gonna start to like say, maybe we're not gonna have him around the kids a lot, but let's make sure he could at least be neutral around them, is focusing on just the coexistence side of things, right? So maybe what I would do is, if you're gonna go over there, right, for a training opportunity, put him in a bed stay for like an hour while the kid is just running around playing, right? But have clear rules of the child is not allowed to mess with him or like approach him or anything like that, and he's got to stay on that bed the entire time, right? And I would just do that for a little bit, you know, and just get him to a place where he could be around the kids and just be 100% completely neutral to them, right? It doesn't matter, it doesn't impact you at all. I need you to just focus on this task right now, right? And that's what I would do initially. And, you know, I always say that that is socialization, right? That's him seeing, smelling, hearing, right? Experiencing being around the kid, where he'll start to get used to all that kind of stuff, where if in a freak situation a kid ran up and tried to pet him or something like that, if you focused on that side of things a lot, his threshold is going to be much higher to those things, right? So that's what I would do. I don't know if I would ever have him like just totally loose around random kids and stuff like that. And that's not because of him, that's just because I don't really do that with dogs. You know what I mean? But you could at least get him to a place where he could be neutral, just hanging out around them like that. So.
Is that what we should do for new visitors that come over too?
Exact same thing. Yeah. So, you know, with guests coming over, my routine with my dogs has always been and always will be for the first like 20 minutes or so that people are in my house. I put my dogs in a bed stay, they come in, they stay there for about 20 minutes, and then I wait until my dogs are totally neutral to those new people. Then I can release them and let them hang out and let them be a part of things. And because you're starting right off the rip like that, consistently where you're saying, hey, don't worry about those people right now, focus on the thing I'm asking you to do, you're getting them into a compliant state of mind so that when you do go to release him, he's gonna be a lot calmer because of it and a lot more respectful. Seems like everything's going great. So usually at this stage, you just got to kind of work with them for a little bit, you know, and just see if you notice any issues pop up, right? Generally speaking, I would say, you know, after that first follow-up session, if things are good, I usually let you work with it for a little bit and then we'll touch base in maybe like 3 or 4 weeks, you know? You could shoot me a text or something, just let me know how he's doing. If there's any questions you have, you know, we could go over them and then get you back in one more time for just another little brush up and then, you know, just kind of plug away. Obviously with the follow-up support, you got a year where, you know, if you run into issues, you can come in for classes for them, obviously. So just keep the communication open, you know? If you run into any problems with anything, just reach out right away. You know how to get a hold of me, obviously. But I think he looks really awesome.
But as you can see a little bit of it right now, this is still like nothing compared to the house.
Sure.
He still gets so
Yeah.
about everything. I know that a lot of it is his breed.
Sure.
And like there's probably only so much. There's gonna be a line somewhere where it's just like he's gonna be kind of crazy.
Sure.
I get that. But there was one time too, I think it was when we had that cookout where Ben came over and Clay came over, where I let everybody in the house and he was in a place stay
Yep.
over on the far side of the house. And he let everybody come in, but he just laid there and like would whine and whine and whine and whine. And was
Yep.
like, dude, let me up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, it's fine, like I try to let him calm himself down, but the problem is he doesn't really calm himself down ever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, like,
How long did you have him there, would you say?
I would say probably 30 seconds to a minute to where it got to like him like being hard to hear, like hard to
Yeah,
listen
yeah,
to,
yeah.
because he's just like obnoxiously whining,
Sure.
you know. And then I waited for him to like get quieter for a second,
Yeah.
so he didn't think louder. He got the
Yeah, I understand.
go. But when I finally told him the 2-letter word that meant
Yeah, yeah.
good, he like let out just like bellow, like almost sounded like a hound dog. He was like, "Ooh, okay," and like would start like screaming about it.
Yep.
And then he was just like super amped up.
Yeah.
But then he just chilled out. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And then when he was super amped up, did he do anything wrong, or was he just really excited?
He doesn't jump on people.
Yeah.
But he gets jumpy. You know what I mean?
Kind of coming off the ground a little bit and
Yeah.
stuff. One, guest coming over, just the whining, really loud, right? Just kind of stuff like that, right? 2, obviously getting the dogs together, a little bit of toy issues, stuff like that. Were those the 2? Was there a third thing also?
And then the only other thing that I was like, and this is more for myself too. So
Yep.
like, basically, I was looking for ways to even make it fun for me.
Yep.
Or willing to do it more.
Sure.
But just like continue to incorporate everything that I did.
That was what she had said.
Weeks.
Yep.
Yeah. Just because if it's not something that is like on my plate,
Yep.
I kind of let it go
I understand.
back
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to,
And when you ask that, do you ask that from the frame of, you know, you just want to make sure you don't let shit slip? Is that kind of like your...
let shit slip, and then also like just continue to even build on it too.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep. So the last thing you said as far as kind of the you know, if it's been too long and he hasn't gotten the correction for a while, stuff like that, I would say that that is normal for every dog, right? So like even my dogs, for example, like they don't really make a lot of your, you know, everyday mistakes anymore. You know, like they don't really jump on people. They don't really freak out at anything outside of the fence, right? Like they're pretty compliant with commands most of the time, you know, whether the collar's on or not, you know, like they don't get into things, et cetera, right? But every now and then something will pop up, right? Like in generally it's something stupid like, you know, I let them in the backyard and one of them starts to get a little slow with coming in when I want them to, right? Or the one every once in a blue moon will start going from she's really good about having 4 on the floor to like she'll kind of do the little like prairie dog when people come over where she's like not putting her feet on them, she's like coming up, you know, or miscellaneous things like that. And because behavior is contingent on consistent reinforcement, right? Over the course of 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, you're gonna start to notice they start kind of testing boundaries again, and you just have to reiterate those boundaries, right? So I would expect to need to do that long term, right? The one thing I would say though is, and this is a trap that I see people fall into with dogs post-training, is when you do need to give those reminder corrections for things, make them count, right? So that's where you get into just like levels on your e-collar and stuff, right? Like there's a big difference between levels that interrupt behaviors and levels that inhibit behaviors, right? Meaning, I'm sure you could correct them at a 10, 20, 30, maybe 40, stuff like that, right, for most things, and it'll stop them in that moment, right? But those levels in that moment might only be enough just to stop it in that moment, but not leave the lasting impression the next time, right? So with those types of things with my dogs, like I would say, like the further you get away from training, your level on the e-collar actually goes up dramatically as opposed to down dramatically, because you want to make sure when you correct for something, it's motivating enough where then he thinks twice about it the next time he goes to rehearse that behavior, and then you've essentially done away with it for a while again. Right? So that's the one thing I would say. And then, you know, you were mentioning like the, you know, when people come over, like how he doesn't jump, but he kind of comes up, right? Like I would be nailing that stuff. I'd be getting that stuff under control, right? If you're noticing, you know, any fence reactivity, which it sounds like he's doing pretty good with right now, but if he does start to revert back to it again, I would give a big correction for that. And any of those types of things, just make sure your corrections for the unwanted behaviors are firm enough.
Sometimes what he'll want to do is just like sprint out of the house just to like get outside for the day. You know?
Sure.
Just go like nuts for a second.
Yep.
Is that something that you would let your dog do and like just be a dog?
Yeah.
Or is that something where you're like you gotta chill out because you're getting too amped up, you know what I mean?
Sure. This is where you get into like realistic expectations with things, right? Like my dogs, when I get home from work, I let all 4 of them out of their crates. They go barreling over to the back door, and I just open that door and just let them burn some energy off. You know what I mean? Like I'm not worried about sitting and waiting at every doorway in those contexts and stuff like that, right? But the key is, the reason why I'm okay with doing that is because I know with 100% certainty that if I need to get them to wait, I can get them to do so easily. Right? So once you have the training established and stuff, some of those things become a little less important, right? Like I said, you know, your front door, obviously, that's not one we want him barreling out of, so you could be really consistent about enforcing that. But like just going into the backyard and stuff, I would say just let him go out, you know, and not worry about having that fight. Because another problem you could run into sometimes with high-strung dogs is you can get so micromanagey about every little detail, and that almost creates more anticipation of arousal, right? Because it's like we're constantly telling them, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, explode it, right? And you're building this cycle of teaching them to do that, where because I just kind of let my dogs out of the kennels, let them go run to the back door, open that door to let them out, let them go run around, open the door to let them back in, and there's no like, hold it in for a minute and then let it out, they're actually a little calmer with it than you would expect because there's not so much anticipation of that arousal, right? So as far as that one is concerned, I wouldn't be overly concerned about that, right? Long term, you know, what I've found to be successful with my dogs, you know, having, you know, high energy dogs, you know, stuff like that, is minimizing the amount of things I'm asking them to do and then just doubling down on being extra firm about the things that I do ask them to do, right? So like I'll go sometimes 4 or 5 days without asking a single command out of my dogs, right? Because I just don't need it, right? Again, they're not getting into things. They're not jumping on people. They're not barking out the window. They're not, you know, doing any of those types of things, obviously. So I don't care if they lay over there or do a downstay over there or any of those types of things, right? That being said, you know, guests coming over, I do a bed stay when people come over, right? If I go for a walk, I am very strict about my positioning on the walk, right, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So that's kind of my philosophy with living with dogs, and especially with high energy ones, is the more you try to fight their nature, right, which is to kind of be a little crazy sometimes, the worse you actually make it sometimes, you know? So that's kind of the direction I would start steering you in, is really looking at, giving him more opportunities to just kind of be a dog and not try to have him bottle it up so much and just isolating the problems you're having. You know what I mean? Because 9 out of 10 times, if you're gonna ask him to down, or you're gonna ask him to wait, or you're gonna ask him to bed, or any number of those types of things, you're doing it because you're trying to get him to stop doing something else, right? So start looking at, when you ask him a command, do I really need to ask this command, or is there something I could be more clear about with him, right?
And that was a question I was going to ask, but like I never really had to, because I'm like, oh, I can just make him lay down in the back seat.
But and again,
A few commands to fix.
that's a good example though, right? So initially in the training process, right, everything is about management, right? We're learning how to manage our dog's behavior and hold them to a higher standard with things, right? Keeping them engaged so they don't rehearse the behavioral issues in the first place, which would be an example like that, right? Where when he's in the back seat, having him in that downstay so that he doesn't get up and start freaking out, right? It's a incompatible behavior, we call it, right? So it's something that he can't do this and this at the same time, right? But we use management while we work on the actual problem. So let's say he has a problem of if he's not in that downstay, he gets really reactive towards people that are walking by the car, right? Or if somebody walks up to your window to say hi to you or something like that. I would start then just working on that problem. Meaning maybe I go through 4 drive-throughs, right, in a training session and have him free in the back seat, have my e-collar set up really high, and only if he freaks out and starts getting reactive, correct him for that, right? That way we could start hitting that point where I don't need to manage him with those commands as much because he's essentially just learned the boundary, right? He's learned that you can do whatever you want to do back there except A, B, C, or D.
I felt bad on the walk going anything much like over 30 at the most.
Sure.
Because I'm like, I don't want to shock the shit out of you.
Yeah.
I don't really know the right time to do it.
No, yeah, for sure.
I mean, or you wouldn't even know exactly like what that point was.
Yeah. No, good question. Because again, these are all things that I experience with my dogs, right? So like with my Shepherd when I had them, with my Malinois, they were 2 very, very high energy dogs, right? And naturally, if you go for a walk and you go to start that walk with a really amped up dog, getting them to stay like right there at your leg it's possible, but like at the same time, it's sometimes a little unrealistic. You know what I mean? Like my Malinois, when we go out for the walk, he's excited, right? And generally for the first couple minutes of that walk, I would say he's like center of his body is like in line with my leg. His nose is like maybe here, but he maintains that perfectly fine, right? It's not like he's like going from there to 3 feet ahead to like 12 feet back to all the way out to the side and stuff like that. It's just he's got a little too much forward momentum in him. You know what I mean? Where it's really hard for him to not go past that point, right? So I always look at the walk of I'm gonna wait for a really committed mistake, and then again, I'm gonna be more firm on that committed mistake so my dog can retain it more. Because when you start getting into the nuances of like 3 inches in front of the leg, 4 inches in front of the leg and stuff, that's going over his head. He can't comprehend that, right? Because it's a very gray boundary. But if I'm walking with him and he's matching my pace, he's giving me good engagement, but then he decides to actively leave me to go sniff that thing, or actively leave me to go like run totally past me or something like that, and I nail him for that thing, that he's gonna actually understand because that's when he made the decision to do something else other than that. All those little 2 inches ahead, 3 inches ahead, 4 inches ahead are him contemplating making that mistake, but he hasn't quite made the mistake yet. You know what I mean? Before we talk too much about stuff, why don't you take him off of the leash real quick now? And I just want to see you enforce some healing around here. There you go. And again, I'll let you know if there's something to correct for here. And I want to see what he does. Yeah, so if he does anything other than the here command, right, and I tell you give him a correction for it, you would mark with no, give your correction, then repeat that here command. Yeah, like that, I've got no problem with that, you know. He's how about this?
Excuse me.
Now this is how I walk my dogs, right? Like if I take all 4 of them for a walk, I use come for it, but same exact concept obviously. I'll tell them come, and the expectation is just be with me, right? And what winds up happening is it winds up looking like a heel, but it's a little looser than one. Well, I do a lot of like hiking with my dogs in the woods and stuff, and when I'd release them, let them go burn off some steam, and I would practice calling them back to that come, right? So release them, call them to come, walk for a minute, release them, call them back to come, walk for a little bit, you know what I mean? And I'd practice drills like that. And getting back to like the vocalness, right? So we call that leaking, right? With German Shepherds and Malinois and stuff like that is when they're just like constantly, it's like leaking the energy, right? if you look at it, leaking is one, a buildup of anticipation of something exciting happening, and two, a stress response, right? He's stressed, not because he's scared or anything like that, but he's stressed because he's like, I really want to go do that thing, and it's stressful that you're not letting me do it, right? So given the fact that it's kind of a stress response and a buildup of that excitement, if I could loosen the parameters, I don't have to correct him as much and build on that stress. You get what I'm saying? So that's why he's calming down a little bit now. He's loosening up with the walking, right? He's softening in his body language and stuff.
If you did this on the trail, this would be awesome.
There's no reason why he wouldn't, right? So let's do this. Let's test this a little bit. So he's still in here, obviously, so you don't have to tell him anything else. Why don't you follow me this way? And then same deal, I'll tell you if there's something to correct for it. I still would not correct for that yet because he hasn't made the mistake yet, right? So why don't you make a left out of here? And then just start walking down the parking lot. And same deal, don't correct him yet, I'll let you know where to. And again, it's a little sloppy, but he hasn't made the mistake yet, so we're gonna wait for him to do so. We're just gonna keep cruising, right? He's still in that here command right now. You don't have to repeat it or anything. I wanna keep cruising here, and we're waiting for him to commit to making a mistake. So he's almost there, but he still hasn't quite done it yet. Right there, go ahead and correct. There you go, perfect. And let's go ahead and go up a little bit. He cared about that, but he didn't like really care about that by any means. It's pretty good. And notice we gave that one correction and now he's tightening up with it a little bit, right? Because since we waited for the committed mistake, he was more clear of what that correction was for. Nice. Yeah, just keep on cruising around a little bit here.
Any other good drills, almost, if you would call it that, that
So-
I could do with them just while I'm working on something, or you know what I mean?
I'll tell you again, I train people to live life with their dogs the way I live life with my dogs, right? Because like, again, I know what works for me and I know it's helped me, especially in having large packs. And I don't do a lot of that kind of stuff. I really don't, you know? It's great initially, right? To keep them focused and start developing a working relationship and stuff like that. But long term, I only use commands where I absolutely need them, right? Because I think that there's a lot more benefit to my dog being able to just like kind of free roam the house and hang out and be a dog, right? Than there is to constantly be asking them to do things, right? And again, you see it continuing to tighten up here. Now, drills like this is good stuff to work on. You know, take them outside and do things like this because this is going to be directly applicable to something you're actually going to need him to do. So touching base on the getting all the dogs together side of things. So the first off, 4 dogs all together at once is chaos, right? It always will be. There's no part of it that's going to not be chaos. When my 4 dogs are together, it's chaos, right? But it can be manageable chaos is what I always tell everybody, right? So as they initially start to develop a relationship with each other, you're going to see all sorts of different dynamics happen because there's so many individual relationships happening at once, right? He's developing a relationship with 3 different dogs. 3 different dogs are developing a relationship with him. Those 3 dogs have different relationships with each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's our job to facilitate as healthy of socials as possible as we're getting those dogs together, right? So you should be looking at every time you get those dogs together the same way we look at like if we're running a social in daycare or something like that. And a couple of the #1 rules with it is no toys, right? Initially, right? Until dogs have a really, really, really great relationship with each other just by itself, toys just add confusion and more chaos into the mix. And you're gonna see guarding, right? So eliminate all the toys when you get them together. Food, obviously, can't have any food out, can't be giving any treats or anything like that. And then the biggest one that I see issues happen with is when we're getting dogs together for the first time, a lot of affection. We're giving a lot of affection and petting them or cuddling on the couch couch or things like that, where I always say your guys' job as you're facilitating that social is to play lifeguard, right? You should be sitting there simply supervising the situation and just making sure that if all hell breaks loose, I'm in a position to be able to step in and intervene, right? So once you eliminate all three of those resources, which are the big things that dogs will generally fight over, you just gotta let them do their thing, right? And I always say try to do it in chunks of like an hour or so. Get them together for an hour, let them do their thing with none of those resources out, then end on a nice positive note. And just do that until they're really good with each other, and don't even worry about adding resources or anything like that back into the mix. If, you guys get a point where you guys are, moving in or something like that, and, we have to cross that bridge at some point, the biggest thing with the resources is you just have to make sure you teach the dogs individually to not steal them from each other, right? So if he's got a resource and your dogs are trying to go take it from him, we've got to be in a position to tell them not to do that, or vice versa. That's the biggest thing when it comes to resources, and as long as you do that, there's no problems there. So I really want you just kind of looking at things more of the lens of simplifying everything right now, right? Simplifying and then being more firm where you need to be. That's my problem with like some of the healing and stuff, is not that it's wrong, right? Like my dogs all know a heel command, right? But it's just, you overcomplicate it where you don't need to sometimes.
Yeah, I guess sometimes too, it's like my face gets the best of me.
Sure.
Like if we're on a walk, they see me kind of like,
Yeah.
now, would you freaking put
I understand.
enjoy this walk?
I totally understand. Yeah. And it's like, it's funny because a lot of that nudging and bumping and stuff is coming from him constantly expecting that we're going to try to fix him, right? And put him into a different position or something, right? So he could never really sit back and enjoy the walk either, because we're constantly nagging him on it, right? So you'll see that as you don't nag him a lot, like what you're doing right now, right, where he's walking and it's becoming more enjoyable, his behavior will get a little bit less bumpy and stuff.
But he was sitting there and just like bellowing.
Oh yeah, I get it. I get it.
I corrected him for it, and I don't know if I should have or not, but it was just like.
Did it work?
No, it made it worse.
Exactly, right? That's the thing I always ask everybody. I was like, well, if it worked, great. Generally speaking, it doesn't work though, right? Because it's just a byproduct of the excitement, right? So a couple things on that point. Oh yeah, we still got a little bit of time still. So as far as your level is concerned, you got to go as high as you need to go, right? Because the problem is if you set these limits in your head of like, oh, we don't need to go above 60, we don't need to go above 65, right? What's going to happen is you're going to run into a lot of situations where he does need a higher level, you don't go to it, and then you half-ass correct for it and don't win the battle. And then he learns that if he pushes back enough on that consequence, he'll win ultimately, right? So you've just got to commit with it, right? We continued following through there and finding a motivating level, and we got him into a fully compliant situation, right? So that's a very important part. As far as the arousal with guests coming over, some of that is going to be just working yourself through it at this point, right? So we're going to see how he does with this dog coming out this time. Much better that time. Because again, the noisiness, the vocalization, all that kind of stuff, it's a byproduct of the issue, which is the anticipation of excitement, right? So there's twofold, right? One, we got to hold him to a higher standard, right? Two, we've got to start to shift the association of why is he getting so jacked up in the first place, right? So let's take, people coming over, right? If every time people are coming over, that means something very exciting to him, that's going to be a problem, right? And I ran into that with Vinny, my dog, where I ran into the exact same situation where my parents would come over, and because all that happened when my parents came over was they would get him super, super jacked up. Every time they came over, he'd lose his mind, right? And I could get him to hold downstays and stuff all day long, but same deal. It was the same, like, right, like whining, hyperventilating, nonsense, stuff like that, right? So you got to make sure that you cut some of that stuff. And then two, you're going to have to let them work through some of that and do more prolonged stays, right? So start implementing a protocol where maybe for the next 3 or 4 times guests come over, he holds the bed literally the entire time they're there. How does he do at the vet generally?
He's never been mean.
Yeah.
But I muzzle him just because.
It's a good call. I muzzle Vinny when I go to the vet still.
That deep whine.
Yeah.
It sounds like a problem, but it's not. But the last time I was there when he got his stuff done before I came up here,
Yeah.
I did everything from the ground.
Sure.
Because the restraint.
Yep.
It just sets in.
It's too much. Yeah.
So like it's
Yeah.
uncontrolled, that doesn't know what they're doing.
And that's shepherds, man. I mean, like they just don't do well with restraint, which is why things like the leash walking and stuff, you got to be so mindful of making sure you're not holding them back, right? And I like practicing the stuff off leash because it puts you in a position where, again, you at least he doesn't feel like he's trapped so much. And that's why I like loosening up the criteria where instead of that heel, it's more of that loose follow, right? Because again, it removes some mental restraint then at that point, and it just makes things easier and easier, right? So this is the kind of stuff I would be putting a lot of emphasis into right now, right? Is focusing on your walking skills and making sure he's bomb-proof off of the leash right now. I would probably be going way higher on your levels in situations you need to. If you notice there's certain triggers like dogs, for example, how that one dog, he wouldn't get fully into that down position. Totally fine, I get it, right? But we've got to get past that hurdle, right? So I try to look at like any areas where I'm finding like weak links with my dogs. I really dive headfirst in those types of things, right? And with him, he knows everything, obviously. He's very capable at this point. You've got to challenge him a little bit more, right? So it's not so much like you ask me, like, what sorts of drills can you work on to help keep him stimulated? It's not even so much about you need to work on drills to help keep him stimulated. You need to challenge him more with the things that you're already doing, right? So the walking in more distracting areas. Go to the park and do a freaking hour-long downstay with him at a picnic table while 30 dogs come by. You know, stuff like that are going to be very important. There's a dog right around that corner there, just so you know. You know, things like this. Like, I don't know how he would generally do with this situation with dogs walking by and stuff, but I think he's doing very well, but you can tell it's hard for him, right? So let's keep doing stuff like this until it's easier for him, right? That's kind of the process of working past some of these types of issues is you gain compliance first, but the compliance is challenging. Then you hit a point where he's compliant and he's becoming more relaxed and confident in being compliant, right? But you've got to hit a point where you're not giving the corrections anymore because you've gotten past the hurdle, which then gets to making sure you're at a higher level. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how all this stuff like works together. So, but I think he looks good. I think you need to hold him to a higher standard, you know, and just simplify what you're asking of him so you can be more firm on those things when you enforce them. And the last point I would say too is don't overwhelm yourself with feeling like you need to do tons of stuff. Just capitalize on the situations that he's in, right? So like I really don't do a lot of training sessions with my dogs at this point. I just really don't. I can't remember the last time I sat down and did like a training session. You know what I mean? I just use it where I need to use it, which is why I said there's times where I go 5 days and don't have to ask a single command out of my dogs because there's just nowhere that I need to, you know? But when I do, like, you know, if I do have a guest come over once every 2.5 weeks or something like that, I'm very firm on that bed stay with them. Or if I do take them for a walk, we generally go for maybe one walk. I would say one good walk a week or so. In the summer, sometimes a little bit more than that. I'm very firm on the expectation with the walking. You know what I mean? So you just got to make sure you're capitalizing on all that kind of stuff.